So remember, Darwin had two great ideas. Their first one, we'll say, is descent from a common ancestor. Wallace also, same thing. He wrote an 1855 paper. The 1859 paper is the one that he sent to Darwin, but he also published the 1855 paper, and that was descent from a common ancestor. And he came to it primarily because of biogeography. And Darwin, though, of course, came to it more from captive breeding, also from his travels in the Beagle around the world when he was a young fella. So, descent from a common ancestor is pretty much like someone descending from their ancestors, their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents. And so it works the same way. Hold on. Okay. This is not your family tree on the left. Great-grandfather, grandfather, father, you. This is your family tree. Okay. So, great-grandparents. If you look back on the tree, they second cousins and then all the other ones, cousins, siblings, and you. This is like pretty much like a phylogeny. It's actually, though, what do they call it? It's the same sort of thing in terms of looking at relationships. And so here's the node. So they go second cousins, and all the rest go back and have a shared common ancestor in the great-grandparents. The grandparents, cousins, and then siblings, you, and parents. Okay, so that's what happens with parents and offspring. Of course, fish, salamander, cat, you, not like that at all. We have a common ancestor, let's say, of all vertebrates. The first vertebrates actually weren't actually fish. They were jawless fish. So we have fish, and then sister taxa to the fish are this whole other group, including amphibians, reptiles, mammals. Well, actually, mammals and the reptiles share a common ancestor, and of course, in terms of cats, in terms of birds, they're also up there as well. Okay, so we can actually think about evolution in the same sort of historical way. So why do family members resemble each other? What do you think? Okay. In other words, they share alleles and that are identical by descent. They inherit them from the same folks. So siblings, you inherit them from your parents. You're related to your parents by 50%. You're also related to your siblings if you both have the same parents by 50%. So we know why they resemble each other. And it's because of historical factors. Evolution, of course, Okay, let's go on to the next. Okay. Is the resemblance of relatives similar to the resemblance of species? What do you think? Similar or not? Do you think species are descended from a common ancestor?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Same sort of thing. You have species that are, you have a common ancestor, and why are they similar to each other?
Because they lived in a similar area, similar.
No, that's convergent evolution. Why do species that are descended from other species similar? What? Yeah. Yeah. So they're the same lineage. They're part of the same lineage. They inherit characteristics. So different species, different animals, we'll say, resemble each other for one of two reasons. Either they're related to each other, or they do live in an environment similar, but they're not related, but it's because of environmental factors that are similar that you get the same sort of convergent evolution. So you can say that birds have feathers, or let's say they fly. Insects also fly, but that's because flight is a convergent trait among insects and birds. Okay. And then, of course, why might descendants of either resemble their ancestors? And we just went over that. So species that are related phylogenetically, in other words, because of their evolutionary history, are more likely to resemble their relatives than they are to other lineages. The only other reason that species might end up looking like each other or acting like each other, any sort of phenotype, is because of similar environmental pressures. So if you look at an ichthyosaur, which was a marine reptile back during the dinosaur age, they looked very much like dolphins. They probably filled the same sort of niche. There weren't any mammals back. Well, no, there were mammals, but no marine mammals at that point, for sure. Now, they both have a fusiform body. That means kind of a long shape that's good for moving through water. But if you actually look at, let's say, their genetics, they don't have genetics. Well, they're extinct, so it's fossil. If you used anatomical features, bones and stuff, they're clearly distinctly different. And that's called convergent evolution. Now, in that case, you can say, okay, this is because of that. This organism has this trait because of natural selection. Because this lineage has it, and a sister lineage doesn't. So we're saying, okay, why does this species over here look more like this compared, and not to their relative, but to some other, yeah?
I remember reading a while ago, and I don't remember what the reason they gave for it is, but they said that the natives of Brazil and the Aborigines, the natives of Australia, when they compared their DNA sequences, that they had similar.
Yeah, that's
but they're really far apart. And,
yeah.
what point?
They don't share very, very much, and they're wondering how did that happen, because the Aborigines got to Australia between 40 and 60 million years ago, the first migration out of Africa of modern humans. The thing is, we didn't have the population of North America until, let's say, 15 or 20,000 years ago. And in fact, by the 14,000 years ago, both North America and South America were populated by that original group. So how would you get that kind of sharing of alleles between one group and another? And that's recent, and I forget what it is. But it could be that, I'm trying to think. Okay. I forget, actually.
Yeah, would it have to be like during the time of the land bridge?
Oh, no.
Like, not that far back?
No. Well, first of all, the land bridge between North and South America, yeah, that's 3 million years ago. So from 3 million, this happened way later, right? Because humans didn't even really show up for 200,000 years ago instead of 3 million. So it's not that. The question is, why do you have this apparent gene flow between two disparate groups that had never met? It might actually be because of gene trees versus species trees. A species tree is like what we see here. Well, gene families have the same sort of thing, and sometimes you have what's called uneven lineage sorting that can kind of lead you astray. That's one explanation. Another, perhaps, is that
maybe they traveled there.
They could have.
Like by sea.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly both of them had, to one degree or another, ocean-going vessels. The question is whether, now we know that there's some good evidence that, oh, I know how it probably happened. Okay. There's some evidence that this first wave actually interbred with this archaic human called Denisovans. And that group that then made it to Australia, that includes Australia, New Guinea, some other Pacific islands around there, the Melanesians, they actually have up to about 6% Denisovan DNA. Okay. Now, this is the group that became part of the Polynesian explosion, where they went all over the Pacific. People in, let's say, northern Asia and Europe and all that, we don't get that. We don't have that mixing with Denisovans. We have it with Neanderthals instead. And then in Africa, there's also, looks like erectus, archaic human interactions there. Okay, so because the Polynesians were able to travel very well, I mean, they were incredible navigators, there's some evidence that they actually made it to North America. And they might have bred with the natives, but they didn't actually start colonies there like they did on oceanic islands that were uninhabited. So that's probably the most likely explanation for it, is that this group of Polynesians, they had some of this shared genetic stuff with Australians and New Guineans and that whole group. So I think that's what happened.
Okay, so sorry, this is going more into human evolution, but the first human ancestors originated from Africa, right?
Yeah.
But by that time, there's still more primitive human species like Neanderthal and the Samoan, like you were saying.
Yeah.
That
So
they could still interbreed with the modern human.
Yeah. Now there wasn't between Neanderthal and then Europeans and Asians, we share about 1 to 2% of our DNA with Neanderthals. They recovered this DNA because ancient DNA, the group by Svante Pavo in Germany, they were able to actually recover ancient DNA and show how Neanderthals and humans were related to each other, and Denisovans the same way. And of course, you can put it on our phylogeny, and you can get a kind of an estimate of when they split, the two groups split apart. But like donkeys and horses, they were able apparently to breed. It looks like with Neanderthals, there wasn't very much introgression between either population of alleles from one side or the other. Like I said, only 1 to 2%. And it very well could be, another thing is, each lineage has a different mitochondrial DNA, haplotypes. That means if they really bred a lot together, you would expect those haplotypes to share just like the nuclear genome would as well. So it actually might be Haldane's rule that there might have been female hybrids produced, but not males. The males were, because they're the heterogyneic sex. So males oftentimes have genetic diseases that show up that females are only carriers of, like color blindness. What's the other one? Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Whole bunch of genetic diseases. Females are characters, these are recessive. Females are carriers, and if they mate with another carrier, or with an individual man, let's say, who actually has the disease, they'll likely have offspring, same sort of thing. Okay, so it looks like, and then there's also evidence, in fact, that there was another round of interbreeding later on with Asians, and so they have slightly higher integration between Neanderthals and that group. And then, like I said, the only group with the Australasians, those are the only group that showed interbreeding between Denisovans and modern humans, and that first wave out of Africa. But before that, prior to that, like Homo erectus clearly left Africa previously, probably 1.5 million years ago. Peking man, Java man, all these kinds of archaic humans, not in North America, but around the globe, across Asia and all that. So they were there first. In fact, some of those lineages probably gave rise to, let's say, Neanderthals or Denisovans after they had moved out of Africa. Okay, so that's kind of how it worked. Okay. So why are neither the descendants of families or species identical? Why are you not identical to your brother or sister? Anybody? How come you're only 50% related? Because you only share 50% of their genes. The same thing with species, or any kind of taxonomic distribution. They share a common ancestor, but they're likely not to share exactly the same stuff, because after they split, they probably started encountering, well, there's genetic drift going on, and they probably encountered different ancestral environments, or new environments, from which they then were likely to evolve by natural selection to better fit those environments. So when we look at the comparative method, as I've mentioned before, we want to try to determine, is this trait, in this case, let's say behavior, the result of inheritance from our ancestors, or is it a derived trait that only a certain lineage exhibits, but its sister lineages don't? And so this common ancestor kind of thing, we can use a phylogeny to actually determine that sort of thing by mapping behavioral characters onto a phylogenetic tree, just like we do with morphological, physiological characters, fossils, all that kind of stuff. Okay. What's evolution by natural selection? What do you think? Don't worry, it's okay. Forget about it. Everybody else around here, they're all idiots. Okay, it's just you and me, we're just going to talk. So what's evolution by natural selection? Darwinian evolution. why would, let's say the ichthyosaurs, which were 60 or 70 million years ago, look like modern day porpoises in terms of how they look and how their body is?
That's their environment.
Yes, they do, exactly. So that's an example of actual natural selection. The environment selects or favors the same sort of phenotypes, but they're distantly related. So that's one thing. Is natural selection, evolution by natural selection, a random process or not? Anybody? And remember, drift is a random process, genetic drift, where alleles change, let's say neutral alleles or alleles that aren't under strong selection, just because the mutations show up, they don't have any effect on fitness. But natural selection, do certain individuals with certain traits or versions of traits do better than others with natural selection, evolution by natural selection? Okay, right? So you have some lineage that, or let's say in a population, you have some individuals that show a certain behavioral trait. Let's say some individuals are bold, others are shy in terms of behavioral traits. Now, it turns out that both kinds of behaviors or traits are usually found in a population, in social organisms. But we'll leave that for now. Some individuals might actually have a trait that other individuals in the population don't. And that trait actually confers a higher fitness advantage compared to everyone else in the population. Fitness, that means what's going to happen? Are they going to leave more offspring or less? More, right? So this is what's called an adaptation. They leave, and then if you roll this algorithm, because that's really all it is, natural selection, evolution by natural selection, into the future, whose genes are going to be more prevalent in future populations? The individuals who were better adapted to that environment versus the other individuals in the population who weren't. You would expect the population in the future, there'd be more versions of the adapted individuals' alleles, because those alleles are actually adapted to this new environment than the other. Okay. I want you guys to read up a little bit on Darwinian natural selection so you're a little bit more familiar with it. I know you probably haven't had evolution for a while, but this is essentially an evolutionary biology class pertaining to animal behavior. Okay?